Hello, my name is Ian Hawkins. I'm the editor of PEX Network. Welcome to the second day of OPEX Week Live. Great to have us with you wherever you are from. We've got guests from all over the world, and PEX Network is, of course, the first port of call for 160,000 members from all over the world. The world in which our members operate is changing at an increasing rate, driven largely by technology, and we exist to guide our members through this change by producing case study-driven content that gives them the tools to improve the efficiency, agility, and profitability of their organizations. If I could draw your attention to a couple of things in the resource box at the moment. First of all, you've got the PEX report, which is a very, very comprehensive study of what's going on in the process excellence world at the moment. We have the results of a survey. We have interviews with thought leaders. We have a very good piece by one of our presenters today. So that's definitely worth downloading if you haven't already. I've also got to remind you that there is a 30% discount for tickets to OPEX Week. It's the last day that this 30% discount is valid. The code is CyberWeek. That's all one word, CYBERWEEK, CyberWeek, a 30% discount for OPEX Week. You can find the agenda and other information also in that resource box. So, without further ado, let me move on to today's session, which is presented by Paul Stone. James Morgan, unfortunately, is indisposed, so his colleague Shay O'Connor has stepped in. So, let me hand over right now to Paul.
Thank you. So what we'd like to do, first of all, is talk a little bit about digital processes in construction. And I'm joined here by my colleague Shay, who's going to elaborate on how our product is, how the product is actually implementing in construction at the moment. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the processes specifically related to construction, the challenge specifically related to construction.
Hi, thanks, Paul. Shay here. One thing that sort of strikes me straight off the bat is with digitizing processes, why construction and why now would you start digitizing your processes?
Well, specifically, if you look at construction, it's full of manual processes that are associated with risks and inefficiencies in an increasingly competitive market. Manual processes are causing project delays and data loss as a result of those manual processes are adding up to increased risk on the project as a whole. And there's quite a lot of areas that are hit by inefficient processes, including things like poor reporting ability. So because you're losing data, you're not able to report on it, you're not able to drive your project forward. And also you're lacking in governance, so you're not sure that processes are executed in the same way every time. And that's
just looking, Paul, at that excessive paperwork area in the whole manual process scenario. Presumably, that in itself has a big impact on day-to-day work. What sort of impact did it have on the construction industry?
Yeah, it's really causing delays. Essentially, is the biggest risk there. So that you're because you're dependent on paper, pieces of paper can get lost, in which case the process can stop, or processes because inaccurate information is captured, that you can introduce project risk because when a piece of paper is passed on to the next person in line, they don't have enough information to complete the job, so it has to be passed back again. So really, pieces of paper are very inefficient ways of communicating between different actors in a process or different people on the construction site, or between the people on the construction site and the people in headquarters. So really, the reliance on paper is causing impacts not just in terms of causing the process to be slow, but causing the process to loop around, and because data in itself is inaccurate, and that ultimately results in delays.
So I can see there like delays is massive, and of all industries to be involved in, construction is probably the greatest example of where time actually equals money. You know, the quicker you get things done, the less people have to work, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I get the whole area of what the challenges are. I mean, I can see it there. So when you digitize, what are the type of benefits that you would expect to see?
Well, I think if the key thing about digitizing processes is the processes run faster. And because the handoff of information between, let's say, a person on site and a person in head office is much, much faster. There's no paper involved. It happens essentially instantly. And that results fundamentally in faster processes. And you also end up with better data quality because data can be captured in a digital format and recorded in a database, so that you can basically validate that data as the data is captured, is recorded accurately, and then it can be reported on. And ultimately, you end up with a better functioning system that you can track and monitor in a very predictable way. So you're not dependent on, example, for Excel registers, like the old way of doing things. You can use reporting instead.
I have to say, that's great. I mean, the headings from a challenges point of view and from a benefits point of view, obviously the challenges are bad, the benefits are good. It's quite simple scenario. You get from really inefficient environments to a really efficient environment. Obviously, you have to look at all these specific areas separately and the impact that they have. But speaking of specifics, what specific example of a project can you give us where you've seen this impact? So that, I think everybody would like to see that.
The one I'd like to talk to you about is the A14, which I'm quite closely involved in. And the A14 itself is a very large construction project, a civil construction project, and one of the largest projects in the UK at the moment, with a £1.5 billion spend on a joint venture between Costa and Skanska and Balfour Beatty. It's a road construction project, one of the largest, with a 31-kilometre stretch of road. And basically, the new road is expected in 2020. It's a 4-year time span.
How many were working on that? Like, how many people work on that for something that big?
2,500 people on that project, so it's really a very significant size. And
I noticed, obviously, it being a joint venture, and I know a lot of the projects to do with construction, especially civil construction, would be joint ventures. You have quite a lot of them. You're dealing with 3 companies, separate companies there, and I presume you're going to have contractors as well, subcontractors, etc. So I can imagine the rationale around trying to organize things there. So on that project, what was the impact that was seen? And again, you're down to specifics now.
Yeah, if you look at the specific details, like on a single process alone, one of the first that they implemented, they estimated a 3,800 hours saved over the lifetime of the project. So really it's quite significant. In terms of digital process, moving from that paper-based process into digital, you're making a very significant saving.
That was one process that you're talking about, just one. Okay.
Yeah, that's just one single process. And using a tool called FlowForma, Da14 were able to automate a further 75 processes in an 18-month time frame. So really, the savings add up significantly. The first one is often most difficult, but once then you implement another one, you can get a snowball rolling and add up ultimately to a very significant saving over the duration of the project, big or large, or small.
Yeah, so on that, so I'm looking at 76 processes. That's quite a large amount, right? And what was the time frame again?
Yeah, they were all implemented over an 18-month time frame, with the first one going live in approximately 3 months.
Yeah, so as you're saying, the first one being the most important from an engagement point of view, right?
Yeah.
And I'm presuming that's just to get people on board, like from an adoption point of view, that's to really get buy-in.
Absolutely, and construction adoption is the biggest challenge. So really getting people to use a digital system over and above paper is in itself one of the largest challenges. And FlowForma was a solution that actually made that challenge easy to overcome. I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later when we go through things in more detail. But getting that first process out is the biggest challenge. Once that first one is in place and people are used to the system, and it's relatively easy to follow on with many other.
Did you get any pushback? I mean, did you get any pushback? Did people?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure, and I think it's basically when people start to use the system, it's very much a snowball effect where you've got to push hard to get that first process not actually automated. Yeah. Getting it automated is easy enough. Getting it adopted is a much bigger challenge. So pushing that out to the business, getting people to use it, getting people to put aside the paper is the first and biggest challenge. But once you get that done, it's a hard push. Once you get it done, it's much easier then with the second, third, fourth, and fifth, so on.
Okay, so if you want to get any level of scalability, you're going to have to get the adoption rate on the first one. That has to be high, and you want all the positivity flowing at that stage.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, with that, I mean, I know the initiative for A14 was derived from Highways England. So Highways England were involved in that. They gave the instruction that they wanted the joint ventures to look for cost savings and that sort of thing. They would have had, I presume, a suite of requirements for that. So they wouldn't have just said, listen, guys, I want you to save a lot of money here. I want you to become more efficient.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Highways England commissioned the A14 project, and they wanted whoever succeeded in the bid, they wanted them to demonstrate that they could work as an integrated team, so the joint venture partners could work together. And to do that, they had to use a common platform for processes and common platform for collaboration. So SharePoint was selected early on. In fact, Office 365 was selected early on as a collaboration platform. And then they needed a system that could further drive data capture, ensure that data was captured in the same way, regardless of which joint venture partner was participating in the process. And then they also wanted to ensure common processes were used so that everybody was following the same rules, the same guidelines. And ultimately, to reduce that paper overhead, to do something different, because previous projects had been paper dependent, and it was a clear opportunity to make cost savings. And that's what Highways England wanted to see. They wanted to see evidence of those cost savings brought about by automation.
So they're basically tired of wasted time. Like, it must be pretty obvious, especially on a large scale job like the A14, that there are certain areas where when you quantify the levels of time it's wasted just on a min or collation of data, of like assembling even forms, etc., and trying to put reports together. When you start going into it individually, of all the itemized areas where a manual setup has an impact, they must have foreseen absolute months of savings in regards to just admin alone on operations.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very clear from the outset that savings could be made, and really that the challenge was simply to find a method of automating those processes in a way that could be done quickly, because obviously the project is a 4-year timescale, and you basically start saving money as soon as you actually adopt and implement and adopt a digital process. So the whole idea was get the processes done as quickly as possible to see the return as early as possible.
But on that, I presume you'll have examples of these processes. Like, what type of processes had an impact straight away?
Yeah, well, I've got some examples here of processes that were digitized on the A14. They're all slightly different, but I'd like to just quickly show you what they look like, because it's often difficult for people, especially here on a webinar, to actually visualize what does the digital process actually look like. So I've selected a few here. Material requisition, one of the first that was digitized. Targeted risk monitoring, the one we talked about earlier. And also a big success, a thing called the permit to dig. So let's go through those very briefly. So materials rec is first up. Now, when we look at this...
Okay. Thanks for that. That looks a little bit confusing. Okay. Even visually like that looks confusing.
Yeah, this is a process map of the materials rec. You always start off with an understanding of your process, right? So this is the process that's written down in a kind of a flow chart. Now, a lot of companies, they have different methods of diagramming their process, but at the end of the day, you tend to have a process diagram of some kind, and this is materials rec. And yeah, for sure, there's a lot of people involved, a lot of steps involved, a lot of actions. But you always start off with this basic, this understanding, and when we say understanding, absolutely, it looks complicated. And so you would imagine that a system implemented that actually followed this process would look complicated as well. But that's not the case with the FlowForma tool. So here's what that process looks like when it's implemented. And it really isn't, I guess it really isn't what you'd expect from seeing that diagram. But this was the beauty of
Even
that.
just from a look and feel point of view, I mean, that looks friendlier. Do you know what I mean? There's no fear factor in that.
Well, that was a key thing in terms of adoption, facing the adoption challenge, was to get something that was easy to use, and easy to adopt and understand. And we found that tool with the FlowForma product because it integrated the workflow aspect of the system with the data capture as well. So if I could explain briefly what's going on there, at the top you see a thing they call a step bar, and it's showing you the steps in the process of where you are right now and what's going to happen in the future. So you understand like what's happening in the past, the future, and what is the present. And that's so important for business users to kind of get a grip on where they are in the process, what needs to be done to complete the process and achieve the business goal and all that.
Yeah.
And
so before they've had a manual piece of paper, filled it in, handled it in somewhere, and then it basically disappears as far as they're concerned. So here now they actually can see where is it going and what are the steps involved in that process. So I mean, even that alone, it demystifies the actual process for them.
That's it, and it's all stored centrally, so anybody can go in and look at that and say, okay, well, I'm on the fifth step in the process. I've got 3 more to go before the goal's done. Yeah. So it's like really obvious and visible as to where you are right now. The other key thing about this, the big difference to the process diagram we saw, is that this includes the data, because each of those process steps that you saw in the previous diagram, there's data associated with it. And without the data, the process itself is a little bit hard to understand. So the system integrates the data with the process so that you can see, okay, well, on this first step here, this is the data that relates to that step. So I'm putting in a materials request, and then I can see, okay, well, this is the data that I've got to enter to put that request in. And then when that's submitted, it moves on to the next step, and the next guy in line can see the data that you've entered and take action on it. So it really works.
But obviously, the cool thing about this is that the guys are on site, are able, the team that's there. So were you saying how many were on the team, the IT team, for helping this big project, like about 4 people? Was it?
Oh, yeah.
From an IT point of view.
There are 4 people in IT, and the guys in IT actually put this one together themselves. And it's basically the system it's very easy
that
to configure.
Itself, under normal circumstances, that itself would be a project. Like if you were to get an IT system, that would have been a project. So the guys just turned this around. One of the processes that they were going live with, that they were putting into the environment, it's one of the 76. And that's it. They just put it out. When you're doing a purchase requisition, they would have probably had that done. Obviously, it had to be a few weeks or at max.
Yeah. There's typically a 2-week time frame for a project, a workflow this kind of complexity. Materials rec is between a 2-week time frame. And materials rec, I chose that because it's a fairly standard kind of process. So this is standard level of complexity of the process that we use. So it's it's a 2-week time frame, and then, as I said, the challenge then is getting it adopted. The first one's hard, but then the rest are very easy, because the system kind of sells itself in a way. Those business users, when they start using the system, they realize that all this data can be pre-populated, and it's so much easier to kind of select an item that I'm going to add onto the materials rec. I can select it from a drop down and so on. So I don't have to,
so no more typing, no more handwriting, not even typing, you just select.
No more typing. Yeah. That's the thing, So that by selecting it and so on, the data is more accurate when it gets passed on to the next person online. And because you're literally just picking something from a drop down, it's really easy to use, and it'll do automatic calculations for you, all that kind of stuff. So people, once they start using it, they get into the whole idea of using electronic form instead of paper, and then it quickly catches on. So next time around, they're looking forward to the next process that they're going to be using.
And what's the targeted risk?
Oh, yeah. Targeted risk is a little different. So the key thing about targeted risk, I guess, is that it needed to be used in the field. So it was actually initiated by people on mobile devices in the field.
Okay.
And that was a big difference with targeted risk. But then once it was initiated on mobile, it would be passed into people in HQ. So there were different types of users. And that's the real thing here, that people needed to be able to kick off a process on a mobile device and then take it inside and process it further in HQ.
I noticed one of the points there is made is that it automatically creates actions. And so I've seen something similar to this in action in the hospital industry. So they have a thing called an ILSM, which is an interim life safety measure. So it's based upon risk as well. But apart from the fact of saving time on the process by digitizing it, which was all great because it used to be manual, etc., and you used to submit the form and it would be filled in. That automatic creation of actions had another massive impact, because when you identify risks, sometimes there are actions that are required of that. So you have to notify people in different areas or different disciplines, depending on what the risk is, that an action needs to take place. So the knock-on effect was that not only were you accumulating and submitting all of these risk assessments, but the actions also kicked off immediately and had a stopwatch on them kicked off immediately. So even when you, like, this is the one you were saying earlier on, had the saving of what, £77,000 alone.
Yeah.
But that's not even quantifying the fact that the actions that would have come out of some of those reports were acted on immediately, again saving more time, and from a risk point of view, addressing those risks faster. So that would sometimes be missed, I would imagine, by people just applying a process, getting it digitized. It's actually then the knock-on effect after that everybody's work is now all together and it's coordinated.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? It's often misunderstood that the benefit is not just the process, the single process itself. It's all the linked processes, because many processes actually link onto other processes in the future, like the actions you're mentioning. And the targeted risk monitoring, it's a very typical kind of risk management process. You have things like other processes like NCRs, non-conformance reporting, and field change requests that are very similar in many ways to this particular process, and they all involve actions that need follow-up and so on at a later date. So absolutely, Shay, it's this kind of process that really fits in well into the construction industry and engineering too, where these are kind of you see this process popping up again and again and again.
Yeah, so if you had one process in and it was just that's fine. But the reality is when you start expanding that footprint from a digital point of view and connect those dots together, your savings on time, never mind just time and money, but also, like in this case, it's a risk scenario. So you could be saving on people's injuries, etc. It's as serious as that. I'm thinking as well with the medical industry that the impact that had. But you have all of that exponentially increasing the savings and efficiency that you're going to have.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, by capturing all this information and all the risks and all the actions and so on, you can capture that centrally and use it for reporting as well. So you can actually know at any point in time, here's a list of risks, and here's the actions, and here's the status of completion of all the actions.
Trends too, I guess.
And you see trends, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the big bonus for Highways England on this was that they ultimately will get a database of all the activity that occurred during the A14 project that will drive new working practices in future projects. So it's savings today, but it's savings tomorrow as well, and that's really important for process automation.
Brilliant. And again, this is driven from a mobile device, because I know for a fact that FlowForma, when you create a process, that it's automatically rendered for the mobile device. So you don't even have to go and create an app; it's there already. So you create the process, and your app is there.
Yeah.
So this is that. I mean, that's great.
That's right. And it really it means you can digitize something quickly and get it into the hands of the end users, regardless of where those end users are, if they're HQ, they're out on site, what mobile devices they're using and so on. You can get it into their hands quickly and get the reaction, and then modify the process to meet the actual real needs on the ground. So it's a very interesting way of doing things that really leads to success quickly. So the permit to dig process is very significant in civil construction.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about this one.
Yeah, the A14 actually recently won an award for this particular process, the digitalization of the process. It was one of the first times it's been done in the industry, and it saved them significant amounts of money because of the number of permits that need to be issued. Now, many people on this call will know all about permits. At the end of the day, you can't proceed with your work until the permit is issued. So getting that permit issued is so important. And yet, the permit to dig was a manual process, relying on pieces of paper, so that permits, were not always issued. Now, a permit to dig, just so everybody knows, is like a permit that's issued to allow you to break ground on, a 3 meter squared area. Now, a 3 meter squared area on a 31 kilometer site like the A14, there's a lot of permits that need to be issued. Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, I presume from a construction point of view, the permit to dig, award-winning, massive savings from a monetary point of view. But the reality is, you're going to have lots of processes that require permits, like to do work. Like you've got like hot works, you've got all these sort of things where you go, well, I can't do anything here until it gets signed off. So if you delay that, that's going to have an impact.
Well, we live in an increasingly regulated world, and especially in the areas of health and safety and so on. So these days, you're required to, by the regulators, to capture certain information and to store it for a period of time and so on, and to follow certain well-defined steps. So this is just, like the permit to dig is just one example, but there are many others where you're forced basically to carry out a process. And if you're forced to do it, you want to do it as efficiently as possible. And certainly with the permit to dig, that's a case where a certain procedure must be followed. So to make it more efficient by digitizing that process, really resulted in a lot of savings.
So you've collected. I mean, with the examples you've given us here, right? So there's 3 processes of the 76. Big thing on this is that you're collecting all your data. So all of your information is now being collected. I mean, you're talking about there from a regulatory point of view, but also I imagine from a visibility point of view, people want to see what the status of the projects are.
Oh yeah, at the end of the day, if you don't have your permit, your work stops. So you have to get that permit issued, regardless of what the permit type is. And what the A14 did was we built a thing called a Power BI report, a dashboard that actually shows us the status of all the permits on the entire site at any one point in time. And using this dashboard, we're able to see if any permits are being delayed and where exactly those permits are. So it's really, this is a here and now, and forget about the regulators, this is a here and now management dashboard that lets you see the status of everything at one point in time. And then
so that gives you up-to-date, clear visibility of the status. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
So it massively reduces the overall project risk. And this is really a key thing that, those digital processes capture all the data. That data is available for reporting, and using that reporting, you're able to manage the risk a whole lot better. And also the costs, because, risks, if they happen, result in costs, and this is a way of avoiding that, mitigating that.
So going back, just doing a bit of a summary from the Highways England initiative, that people have to become more efficient, that when you bring companies together, especially, they have to have a common way of doing things. We all know the best way of doing that is digitally having them work off the same platform, the same mechanisms. The examples are class. I love that, and especially the fact that one of them alone has a saving price tag on it, that they actually went to the bother of showing, well, here's the return on one process. That's great. But getting this off the ground, so excuse the pun, but getting this moving, and what would you have to do just to get the ball rolling on a project like this?
Yeah, well, my tips for getting that project off the ground, and certainly reflecting what we did in the A14, is first of all, you've got to find a champion. You have to find an internal salesman, a person who's actually going to help with adoption and convince people to move away from paper and embrace the whole digital revolution and start filling in digital forms. So you have to find a champion who knows the process, who knows the resources, who knows the capability of the system that they're implementing, and actually can go out and demonstrate the system to end users and get them on board and get them using it. And usually once you do this and demonstrate value, the end users themselves will become the champions of the product or of the product of digital process automation. So that's why we always say target the obvious. So if there's any obvious pain points, something process that everybody complains about, that's the process to do first, right? The one that everybody knows and everybody doesn't like. Get that digitized so that people can see straight away, oh yeah, this is easier, this is getting me results, and you know what, I'm gonna ask for other processes to be digitized.
I imagine the finding of a champion is the most crucial there, because if you don't have somebody who is leading the charge to get this done, like a supporter, somebody who sees the impact that a digitization of your process is going to have, if you don't have that person involved in this whole mechanism and this whole initiative, you're going to find it tough.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely the case. And it's so important to find that champion. And it's funny that the champion, it's not any particular role in the company. So you might be thinking, oh, that's the IT guy. Not at all. It's often the business process owner, or else it's a person who has been around for a while, knows the company very well, knows the structure and so on, an experienced guy, and they take on the role because they can see the potential benefits that are going to result. So it's funny, with champions, they're so important, and they're maybe not necessarily the people that you might expect them to be. But
you do need you need okay.
Yeah.
You need a leader on that one, somebody who's supported. Okay.
Yeah. You need a person from the get-go, absolutely. And once you get going on it, once you have that champion, the thing to do we recommend is set up a center of excellence. So we had 4 IT people in the A14 who basically acted as a support center for the rest of the company. They happen to be IT people. I know from speaking to FlowForma that other companies use a mixture of IT and business resources. But the whole idea is that you have a small group of people who are actually the go-to people for any digital process automation efforts. So you can have to react quickly as well to any feedback you get from the audience, and then make sure you train people to help themselves. Ultimately, to get that snowball rolling, that's what you need to do.
So in this case, we have a selection of FlowForma supported by Highways England, a great initiative that automates the processes but allows guys to actually create the process a lot easier because you're dealing with a no-code environment. Why did they choose it?
Well, the main reason they went for it was that you need a low digital skill set. So obviously you have people working with paper, they don't have a lot of digital skills. You need something that's easy to adopt. So that a low digital skill is a product that would work with a low digital skill set, a set of resources was key. Also, we had to have a short time to value because the project time frame was fixed. So the quicker you can get the benefits, the more you save overall. And something that would remove the risks of paper so that those improvements would be more sustainable and guaranteed throughout the project lifecycle. And then also a system that might engage with external agencies like suppliers. So that's something we did in the A14.
Yeah, so they're using FlowForma Engage then, right?
Yeah, that's right. The A14, we have a form that external suppliers can use to register details. So they're outside of the context of the A14, if you like.
Okay.
But they're also involved in the process, which is a really beneficial thing. It saves a lot of paper.
It's a cool feature. I didn't realize that they were utilizing that, but that is a cool feature for bringing in third parties, for anonymous users, basically outside of your internal environment, right? So security brings them in.
Yeah.
Okay.
We found that useful in certain circumstances, but there might be a limited number of cases of that, but in every case it makes significant savings. The other thing with those startup costs, we want to be able to get up and running as quickly as possible, and that required it to be a low entry point, because we had to obviously cost justify the investment. The smaller the startup cost, the easier it is to get going, and then once you get going, we can get bigger and bigger, digitize more and more processes. Okay.
So just from basically from a product point of view, you're talking about, so FlowForma has sort of 3 big takeaways. And the main one being there's no code environment. So this is especially relevant in the construction industry where they wouldn't have had a lot of automation and they wouldn't have had a lot of digital presence. So now you're bringing in a platform that doesn't require specialist coding skills. You basically need to know your process. That's the main thing you need to know. Also, because it sits on Office 365, you've got a platform that's already there. So you've got an infrastructure that's there. You're just utilizing that. FlowForma is an app that sits on top of that. It doesn't take any data. All the data is retained in your Office 365 environment and your databases. So in other words, if you do integration, it's all self-contained within your environment. Rapid time to value is enormous because the estimations are anything between 6 and 10 times faster to create a process in FlowForma than it would be to create in any other legacy system. Like that's enormous from a professional services point of view alone. Not only are you doing it faster, but for the most part, you're doing it yourself, or you have existing people that are in your own workforce that are doing it. So that cost is set. You output more with FlowForma. You're saving left, right, and center. This is just a view of some. It's just a snapshot of some of the customers that use FlowForma. Now, as you can imagine, all of these they're in different industries. They all started off using FlowForma for different reasons. Usually, what customers come in and ask is how to solve particular problems, etc. And they have that starting point. As Paul, you were saying earlier on, you focus in on, you target the obvious. They targeted the obvious thing that would have an impact, and they all did it with different ones, and they all had an impact. And then, as a result, because they got buy-in then from the rest of the organization, they can then expand the footprint of their digital transformation. Now, I know that digital transformation is a big phrase in all industries and so on, and it may seem like a really big elephant to eat, but the reality is you do go at it one bite at a time. You go at it targeting those simple processes, kick that off, get buy-in from your supporters and those that are just involved in the process itself, that had been involved with manually, get that rolling out. Once that has an impact, then you expand it. I noticed one of them there is LSTM, so Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. They were the first one, I don't know if you know this, but they were the first ones that told FlowForma that they had a paperless department. So their finance department has gone paperless. So the impact of FlowForma from some people's point of view, Da14, you're talking about time and money being the main winner out of it because of the efficiencies and times. Somebody like Europol, etc., they were gauging it on just efficiency ratings. How much more can we do in our day? So it was totally born from that because they weren't working on projects per se. So you got Da14, that's a project that has a fixed figure, and hopefully you can come in below budget. Where you have organizations who have fixed prices and they just want to become more efficient, actually do more with what they already have. So either save money or do more with what you have. It's kind of, you're given that choice at the end of it all. That's pretty much it. Thanks, guys, for listening to us. And I just want to pass back over to Ian.
Thank you very much indeed. We are down to the last few minutes, so I'm going to ask you if you can keep your questions, keep your answers to these very, very brief, please, gentlemen. First of all, question that's come in that says, I like that FlowForma is no code. Typically, how long would it take to automate a process with this product?
So that's kind of how long is a piece of string scenario. You're talking about, it depends on the size of the process. But typically when we get engaged, you're talking about a 5-step process with about 100 fields of content with outputs of forms, etc., documents, because it allows for automatic document generation. You would create that in net time, probably about 5 days, because you have to get agreement from people. You have to get, people have to see it and they go, yeah, I like that, don't like that, that sort of thing. So with net time spent on it, roughly 5 days. And that's when we have a sure start and onboarding program that it's around 5 days, and all of our customers who use it, and they all do use it, they get their first process up and running during that time frame.
And speaking of your customers, who do you think is the best person in an organization to roll out a digital process automation journey?
Very good. Yeah, that's a that comes up quite often. And the way we see it is it can be either IT, but usually the business. So you get support from IT, but that sponsor that we talked about is the best individual, somebody who is driving out of the department and or an organization, and they want to reap the benefits of digitizing something, digitizing their processes. They are the ones that need to be involved. So it's the sponsor who can get all of the people around them working together. You just have to have that. But we will always involve IT at some stage because it has to conform to what they're already doing.
Okay, and what I'm going to do now, I think we're all out of time. I'm just going to push the next little slide out so that people can see what they're doing. If you'd like to download an Da14 case study, you can. You can book a live demo with a process expert, or you can register for a 30-day FlowForma trial at flowforma.com/trial. That's flowforma.com/trial. A reminder that you can download all kinds of other things from the Resource Center, and we'll be seeing you in a few minutes. If you're joining us for the next session, just click on the forward arrow. Thanks very much for your time, everybody. Speak soon.